Hello and welcome to week 6. Can you believe we only have 2 more weeks within this term? And so much has happened over the past 6 weeks. And I hope that you are still encouraged and learning a lot and continuing to be excited as we move forward in successfully completing this class. I wanted to start today's lecture off with a verse in regards to encouragement that will hopefully continue to help you as you continue this journey of learning, as you have a few more weeks of assignments and readings to make sure that you are capturing everything that is needed in regards to learning about family and violence and how to manage that violence and better understand individuals that have been impacted by it. And so with this week, I start with the prayer from Acts. It's in chapter 2, and I will begin with verse 25. And this is King David, and it's really in reference to the Holy Spirit coming and being there and being with you from God's promises of sending his son Jesus Christ to die on the cross and forgive us of our sins, and that we always can look to God for our strength and for forgiveness, turning things that may seem full of guilt and regret and and fear, anxiety, and giving it to God and seeing the pureness that can come from trusting and having faith in God that he will forgive you of your sins and be there for you. So this is King David talking to the people in regards to, I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. No wonder my heart is filled with joy, and my mouth shouts his praises. My body rests in hope, for you will not leave my soul among the dead. And I'm going to continue on. You have shown me the way of life, and you will give me wonderful joy in your presence. And so I share that prayer or verse with you because I just want you to know we're reading a lot of disheartening and very sad and could be potentially depressing or triggers for some of you that have had family members or experienced it firsthand. And so I read that to know that God is with you, and through all adversity and challenges and concerns and doubt, just know that he wants the best for you. And so even though the road may not seem clear or safe, or you're feeling discouraged, just know that God is right by your side and he will be there to lift you up, and that you can smile and have joy and peace even through the pain, knowing that the outcome will be for his glory. So I hope that was helpful to you. I do want to speak to, and I will, you will see it in the email, because I want to make sure that you all are aware. I am spending time each week with my lecture. So in lieu of giving you just a PowerPoint of what's basically regurgitate it from what's in the text, I try to go through your agenda for the week, your reading assignments, your discussion board, any other assignments you have. I try to apply from the theory that you're reading in the books, because I understand it's a lot of percentages, a lot of information, but that is all intended to build your awareness and hope to adjust some of those biases that you may not even realize that you have in dealing with other individuals that may be impacted by quite a few of these um, different and various maltreatments that we are looking at, and violence and abuse that we are looking at and have read about over the last 6 weeks. And so my lectures are just as important, because you will hear practical examples of what that is in relation to what you're reading in the textbooks. The expectation of your assignments are to read the textbook. So I am trying to be humble and diligent in supporting you by understanding that giving you another piece of document, such as a PowerPoint to review, is not necessarily enhancing that knowledge, but more so just taking up more of your time. And so this is 400 series. I say that every week, but I just want to reiterate the value and importance that comes with that. There's so many prerequisite classes that you took before being able to get to this class, I'm assuming, and or it's an elective, so you've taken other classes and now you're taking this with some experience of what that structure is. And so this structure here that I'm trying to provide you is taking into consideration the sensitivity behind what you're learning and allowing time for you to process and really read all aspects of the information that is before you. So that's why you see there's chapter readings each week, and there's also articles and or videos that I'm attaching to your weekly learning activities in an effort to help just continue to allow the knowledge and the awareness to continue to expand, and you can better understand in this field or even working in other career fields how to better understand people. I was working with an individual last week and we were talking about different situations and aha moments that we were experiencing in our relationship of working with others. And in explaining this, she shared with me a discussion that she had had with someone else. And what they were acknowledging was there are so many of us. And if you look into the chapters for this week, and I'll switch to that really quick so you can have that view while I'm talking it through. You have to reach chapters 11 and 12. So ecological context of family violence, as well as racial ethnic issues in family violence. There is an article implementing a strength-based approach to intimate partner violence worldwide. A lot of great information in regards to data, statistics. It also goes on when you get more into chapter 12 and it starts talking about protective factors. So really good information for you to read. And I'm hoping that you align that with my lecture as I share some practical experiences that are hopeful in helping you to better understand. So back to my point and me having this discussion with my friend, recognizing that so many go through various types of physical neglect, sexual, financial, emotional types of abuse, and then they're tasked with moving on in life, and many are in the workforce, many of them are your coworkers, some of them are your family members. And when situations arise or potential triggers that we're not even aware of because that's personal to them, when that comes to the surface, we take that personal and we think that it's an attack against ourselves. To whereas if we take a step back and instead of saying, this person acted like blank, whatever you want to fill that in with, or this person is so mean, or this person hurt my feelings, switch that around in your mindset and say the same question, but instead of this person, put why did this person act blank? Why was this person mean to me? Why was this person attacking me? Because what we fail to realize, and that's where implicit biases kind of intervene and really begin to program the way we think and see things, is we don't take into consideration some of those personal or trauma type experiences. So when we talk about child trauma, we think that that's linked only specifically to the child, and that as soon as they're taken out of the environment or as soon as they get some type of support and resources such as therapy, whatever the case may be, we think that they have moved on in life and everything is okay. And now they should be able to manage their situation and continue on and be this product of a sane and comfortable um, person as much as possible. But what we fail to realize that what comes with that is depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and those types of disorders or mental disorders can take a lifetime of prevalence that really impacts them in different ways and comes out in different situations. And so that's why it's very important for us to be understanding in this field of work, to recognize that what you see is not necessarily intended for you in regards to things that are said to you, how you're treated. People are maybe rude, less lack of patience, lack of understanding. Their registry of language may not be appropriate. But if you dig deeper, and I've talked about this in previous weeks of my lecture, if you dig deeper, you will truly have a better understanding of what an individual may be going through. So just to share with you within your readings, and I am going to touch through just some points that were interesting and stood out. But it's still, the expectation is for you to read all of this under information and work to gain your own clear understanding, and then use that in your discussion board this week, as well as a presentation, your presentation number 2 that is due. So when you talk about just overall statistics, 32.6% of murders by inmates and intimate people, sorry, not inmates, intimate people from neglect is 32.6%. When you talk about physical abuse from murder from intimate people, so we talk about intimate partner violence, 22.9%. Recognizing that 4 out of 5 child fatalities for children in the US under the age of 1 is 79.2%. Pretty discouraging and disheartening to see. We are the highest in the US when it comes to these type of fatalities. And then when you start looking at females and the homicides that are impacted from that, 1 in 5 injury-related maltreatment deaths are from infants, or have to do with infants, like I spoke of before, and or females. And so when we talk about infants, it's the beating and the suffocation, to whereas females, more times than not, it's the physical beating type of violence that occurs. And what's interesting though is abuse under the age of 11, when you look at the statistics, it's about 9,467 impacted by that. So very, very alarming in that number. However, what's even more alarming is compared to the 2,973 that were reported. So you're talking about an average of 6,500 that are not even getting reported. And so when you talk about child trauma, when you talk about longevity of those impacts, PTSD, anxiety, depression, many types of bipolar and mental disorders could have been the cause from some of these statistics that you're reading about. Some of you have been open and transparent and shared some of your experiences and fit into some of this as well. And so just having a better understanding of it helps to better recognize how we address that, or how we deal with individuals that have been impacted by that. So what's interesting is when we talk about male victims, there's 500,000 on average that are impacted by some type of intimate partner violence abuse. And so when you talk about spousal abuse and impacts against their wives, it's so interesting to see that there's surveys and assessments to recognize in these studies that women feel very comfortable with thinking that it's okay to put their hands on men. And then the men don't report them, as you've read in previous chapters, because they feel that they don't want to bring to light something that could be embarrassing, or in their mindset, it's personal. So what we find in all of these statistics and all of these different examples and studies that we're reviewing in our book and in these articles is, a lot of times it becomes this ongoing generational type of experience. And so individuals have seen it from a young age. And so it's a history of that violence that they're not even recognizing as it being something wrong or bad. And we spoke about that, or I have spoke about that in previous lectures as well in different instances. But really looking at that history of violence, and is it generational from generation to generation? And so it's just an expectation. And then when you talk about being impoverished and how you're living in a living structure of poverty, then a lot of times those statistics are higher because it's a greater sense of stress and anxiety, a greater sense of survival. And so then you're looking to other entities and self-medicating and finding ways to manage some of those challenges and tyrannies in the moment that you may be going through, and not recognizing that the alcoholism, the substance abuse, male dominance, all those things are true factors of what occurs when you are impacted by or a part of these type of abuse and violence. So it's just sad. And I've shared with you in all regards to elder abuse and maltreatment. And I've shared with my own personal experience that taking care of my grandmother and having to step in because recognizing some of that maltreatment that was occurring. And so I come from almost 3 decades of experience in human social services and knowing agencies and offerings of services and what resources are readily available. And it took me 2.5 years to try to sort through and recognize and identify the maltreatment that had been occurring in the past, as well as the resources that were lacking and that were needed. And so my grandmother was greatly under resourced. And then to find out, the more I dug and the more I started getting into greater detail of her needs and her medical care and treatments and things like that, you identify there was much emotional abuse because she wanted the love and support from her kids and wasn't getting it. They weren't meeting that as she had hoped. There was neglect there in so many different instances, and then great financial abuse as well. And so we we saw the tyranny of that occurring, and then what becomes so disheartening in my true experience and story with that, because this is my grandmother, this is someone that has been in my life since I was born, and such a positive aspect of my life, and then to see her get to a point in her life where she should be treated golden and happy and no problems or concerns in the world other than her health and being safe and healthy, but still dealing with some of these types of abuse. So when you look at statistically overall, emotional abuse serves as 4.6% for elders, physical 1.6%, and sexual 0.6%, neglect 5.1%, and financial 5.2%. So you can see financial and neglect, then emotional being the highest three. And just to see that stand out to me, even individually, and as I share, taking 2.5 years, and then at that point in time for us to identify that my grandmother had pancreatic cancer aggressively and shortly after she passed away. And so those are still um, emotional and tyrannies in my life that I'm still processing and dealing with, as that just happened at the end of last year. And so there were um, many emotions and feelings and awarenesses that were brought to life you that it takes time to process. And just like I talk about the child trauma, it's the same type of impacts, that those things don't just go away just because life continues, and you might be able to smile and have joy and give it to God and know that you are going to be okay. It doesn't mean that those things aren't impacting you. And so then you start talking about depression, you start talking about health issues, you start talking about how you treat your kids and lack of patience with your kids and things like that that can have long lasting impacts. And so I'm hoping that this is just building your understanding and your awareness of how to really broach these type of situations with either you and your family personally, and or dealing with those that come across your path throughout life. Another interesting factor, and I'm not going to go into great detail about, is the corporal punishment aspect of it. So in the readings, you'll be able to kind of assess what your thoughts are about that. So really interesting. I encourage you to do that. As well as another thing that stood out to me that I do want to give some attention to, 40% of the abusers, those that are violent in their approach, are active role models. And so, is that not interesting that 40% are people that we look up to, people we respect, people that would more than likely be able to persuade the person to keep it a secret? Because the sad part about that is that 75% have no punishment from their actions. And so, again, being able to look out for some of these tendencies, practices, and being able to serve in a way, with removing those biases, and then helping the victims to know that they have done nothing wrong and that you are there to support them as um, they get the help that they need. Another interesting aspect of the readings was the child abuse. And I know we've talked about it, you guys have written about it, presented about it, but just the spanking versus what's appropriate spanking, what's considered, you know, corporal punishment in spanking and abuse, and who should do it. Should the government interfere? Should they not? And it's just interesting to read those statistics. And then from that, though, can that lead into different variances of sexual abuse? And so there's another opportunity for you to assess your understanding of how you see sexual abuse and really how it's tolerated in ethnic groups. And when you start talking about race and ethnicity, say that fast 3 times. Um, Very interesting to learn more about some of those impacts. And so you talk about ethnic groups that are less tolerant. So women, white Caucasian women, may be more open to abuse than African American women. And just reading that, not to say that they both don't experience those things, but just the different variances of how that impacts them. And then when they do experience maltreatment or abuse, how they manage that. And so I have family that still to this day has substance abuse problems, more so alcoholism, um, due to being molested as a child. And it was swept under the rug, and her mom didn't address it, and they didn't hold the family accountable for who allegedly did that to them. And this is coming out 30, 40 years later, and you're still only getting bits and pieces of the information. And so I'm sure some of you have had those experiences. And so when you see my family member um, intoxicated, people want to point the finger and judge, but not realizing that this was child trauma that impacted this in her life. And it's not so easy to just remove that from her and continue on in life as though nothing happened. However, I did attend a conference on interesting flip side of that, and we were looking at poverty and how do we continue to help people in poverty get ahead, and really looking at those child traumas of survival and the parent being forced to survive, the child being forced to survive. And so abuse oftentimes comes out in ways that you don't even realize because you think that this is just your family structure and how you survive. But I think I spoke up before of a child growing up living out of her car and having to get out of the car in the morning, get dressed out of the trunk of the car, and trying to find the most cleanest clothes that were available for her to wear to school. Not that any of them were clean, and not realizing that that's maltreatment as well by going to school with dirty clothes or not being fed or not having food or not having a safe place to sleep, things like that. And so when you start talking about different cultures, there's a different understanding and interpretation of what maltreatment and abuse truly means. So I think I covered the readings in great detail, but to just kind of wrap that up so I can continue on in discussing what else is needed for this week. There is additional reading that is needed in the article, and let me go there now. So from your reading assignment, you will see that you will have to do the article and implementing a strength-based approach to intimate partner violence worldwide. What I love about this article, it's only about 13 pages, but what I love about this article is it not only discusses what that looks like as far as the statistics behind it, but then it gives a different approach to how we can try to intervene and have preventions of protection from a strength-based approach. So it talks about really looking at it from a different perspective. And so I'm going to scroll down, if you don't mind, because I really want to point out this area of the article. And so when you start talking about findings, it gives you a lot of good data, but what it breaks it down to, and I'm hoping I get to there, I'm not making it too easy, right here. What it breaks it down to, and what I love about this, is it gives it a different approach from tools for an optimal response to family violence. So focusing on individual strengths, the respect, what are those survival skills, but let's use them in a positive manner instead of focusing on the negative aspects. Strategic thinking, how can we problem solve? How can we seek resources? Looking at the value of commitment to your family, loving parents, ethical values, spiritual well-being, then the community strengths and how are these systems structures set up, so that social environment and the values of family, effective educational systems, religious communities, family service programs, then jumping over to the family strengths, appreciation and effectiveness for each other, affection for each other, positive communication, registries of language, using your words to speak positivity, and then cultural strengths, being able to break that cycle of what might be negative in your life, and how can we be enriched by that cultural history that has meaning and direction and inspiration, and not focus on those generational setbacks that have continued, and then looking more and understanding of society from a global context and not just in that tunnel vision of what they're seeing. So a lot of great information in this article that I'd like you to give your attention. Thereafter, you would be listening to my lecture, and then you would continue on to complete your discussion question. So your discussion question this week has to do with examining your own experience, but I want you to use your readings as well, and remember to do your APA formatting and citing even within your discussion. And so the actual question is, have you noticed the prevalence of violence in your own viewing of movies, television, music videos, video games, and internet use? Do you view violence as a normal part of life or something that happens on a rare occasion? Do you believe this violence is a normal part of American culture? Are other cultures different? What makes them different? Is violence something that occurs among strangers or within our interpersonal relationships? So I want at least substance in what you're writing, as well as your responses to your classmates. This here is your rubric of what you want to look for outstanding contributions, making sure it's substantive, major insight, good discussion, interesting, challenging, and then that you're quoting and using APA format as well. So that's so very important. In addition to that, this week, so you do have additional assignments this week, even though last week you just had the discussion. This week you have your presentation number 2 that you will be completing. And so in this assignment, you're going to use your readings and a video to create a 12-slide PowerPoint presentation about racial and ethnic factors in family violence. There should be 10 slides of text, and then you'll have a slide for your title and a slide for your reference. You should have 3 to 4 bullet points as far as content, not too much content, but enough for the reader to understand what you are expressing and wanting to cover. As you see here, there's a breakdown of each slide and what's needed. Must be APA format. It should be minimum include at least 3 references, and they have to be peer reviewed. It can't just be a reference from Wikipedia or something. Use your ProQuest, use your resources, use your library, and it has to be 3 valid references that in addition to your textbook. Here's the rubric as well to make sure that you understand the criteria: introduction, faith, personal reflections and conclusion, ethnic minorities, prevention and intervention, and then if your APA formatting. So again, proofreading your work, it has to go through SafeAssign to make sure you're citing correctly. and that you are covering all the pertinent information that's needed. We have a few more weeks, so I encourage you to use this time to prepare for that critical assignment. You'll have another presentation then. If you look at my lecture from last week, I discussed what was needed for week 8 and that it's due early. It's week 8, but it's due by day 5. So you don't have till that Sunday at midnight. It's due by day 5. So just to reiterate that. I think that is the majority of what I wanted to cover for this week. I wish you all a wonderful and blessed week, and I hope all goes well. And I look forward to reading your discussions. And feel free to reach out to me or email me if you have questions or concerns. Have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Goodbye.